Okay, so episode 5, Watch Us, Listen to Us Surveillance. So in this episode, we unpack a lot of post 9/11 aftermath that goes into shaping the United States. And it's a period of anti-nationalist criticism, and Muslims are experiencing regular airport profiling. There's like a wave of mass surveillance as well. When you moved to Lahore, Pakistan, with your bandmate Basim, what was it like to just pick up and leave?
I think that part maybe came a little. It wasn't that I just did it like overnight type thing, but there was definitely then an excitement. Like I was pretty not doing well at home, and and again, it's not that I hadn't been to Pakistan before, but the idea of just going and doing my own or doing our own thing there was so cool. And I still remember the flight, and getting there. You usually land at like 2 a.m. and I just remember, I think the way I talked about it in the episode, or maybe I didn't, was just having them pick me up instead of my family was just so different. And then that first experience with the police and everything, and it was just like right away, it was very, very exciting at first, because it's just like packing up and moving, not just to a different city, but to like a whole different country.
Right. And did you have any kind of like expectations or maybe like goals of like what you wanted to do while you were there?
Yeah, so we wanted to play music, definitely. Like we weren't playing music as Caminas, but we wanted to, we kind of wanted to just like go and just like be the fucking coolest whatever band, like just we knew nobody was going to do the kind of music we were going to do. We just had all these big ideas of like having our own little studio in our apartment, and just like, and he already had a bunch of friends too, so it was just to just like make punk music in Lahore, Pakistan, which really hadn't been done.
You mentioned a really pinnacle moment that stuck with you in your time there, when the Camino's music was kind of called out for being critical of Pakistani Muslims. Did that comment like touch on like a deep-rooted like fear that you had?
Yeah, so I mean, it was more of just a call out for us being, I think I said in the show, just sort of like media caricatures and not real. And yeah, that was absolutely a fear that I had something that came up pretty much as soon as we almost started the band. It was like, what are we like really about? Are we just like making, are we just saying shit for the purpose of saying shit? Do we like, because the first year or two, like we weren't even that great like musically. So it took some time. It just took time. So and yeah, when that happened, it was just it just was it was uncomfortable, and it was kind of like the shroud of this is going to be not easy, but this is going to, we're going to just come here and everybody's going to like what we're going to do just because we're interesting in a way. Like were we like exoticizing ourselves, like, oh, you of course you're going to like what we're saying because we're like the American Pakistanis. And I remember one night we were talking to these sort of other musicians about like the problems with like this thing Coke studio was just starting in Pakistan, and we were all like, oh man, we would never do that, or we would this and that, and we didn't understand that like there's no real music infrastructure in Pakistan. And this, for while it sucks that people have to fucking rely on like corporates like Coke or whatever but they're actually providing jobs to musicians. And not that it's not still a controversy in the country, but just being like young and thinking you like know everything.
In Lahore, you mentioned that you began using again, and you were in this familiar space, but also unfamiliar because you're going back without your family this time.
Right.
Do you think that with like not having the support system of your family almost aggravated the situation, or was it nice to be in a different place for a while? And
for a little while, it was nice. I remember Basim had actually told everybody that like, hey, listen, don't give this kid any joints or whatever. Right. Don't get him high. And it's not really a situational thing. Like in my experience, like if you have not addressed your addiction or whatever your problematic use in a meaningful way, like it doesn't really matter what situation. Obviously, like if people are like smoking hash around you 24 hours a day, it's going to be easier to do it. But like I wasn't doing well at home before I left for Pakistan. Like I was already, I was already making plans to kind of like start doing it again anyway. So I had plenty of support there too. Like it's not that I was totally on my own. Like, but yeah.
On your way back from Lahore, you were mentioned that you were detained at the airport.
Mm-hmm.
And you said stops at the airport was almost like a rite of passage. And a lot of, I think that you kind of expressed a lot of disappointment in yourself for not handling the situation better, like your grandfather might have. Why were you blaming yourself in this moment? And like a lot of people, I think, would have like expressed like more fear, but you were like almost blaming yourself for not handling.
Yeah, I don't know. Like it's even something now where like when the band has been at the border together, some of my bandmates are just better at talking shit with the border agents. And like what you're supposed to do is kind of like talk in circles, and like just sort of make them feel ridiculous for asking you these inane questions. But I just, and I think it's okay now. I'm just a sensitive, a little bit more fearful person. I'm just not very good at being like loud and vocal and and just like, so I think it's okay now, but it's in the same way that like I don't know if anybody could identify with this, but being someone who's a little more like sensitive and soft spoken and just like intimidated by people that whatever your idea of like a confident, in my case, male figure would be. I always thought of my grandfather as that, and me being sort of like a less confident, kind of like a meek, defenseless person. I guess like it was hard to shake that.
You also go into talking about the Obama administration and how Obama expanded on a lot of problematic policies that directly impacted Muslims, like the CBE, which basically recruited a lot of non-law enforcement professionals to engage in this soft surveillance. So the masjid in some ways felt like an unsafe place a lot of the time. And I think you mentioned that your parents were pretty involved in the community. Did that impact your parents a lot and your family?
It's really interesting that you bring this up. Just the other night, so my parents had their first fan meet and greet from the podcast. There's other show called Mommying While Muslim, and we had one of their hosts, Uzma. She has in-laws that are close to that place, the Boxborough where I grew up. And so she was like, "Hey, I'd love to meet you. I'd also really love to meet your parents." So my parents had her over for dinner. It was really cool, but we started talking inevitably about this CVE stuff. And the interesting thing so my father, and I actually wish we were able to delve into this a little bit in the series, but Wayland was one of those communities that basically has had a long-standing relationship with law enforcement. And my dad is still somebody that thinks that it's better to have that relationship than not. And him and because, even directly sort of because of the episode, I still sort of argue with him about like, no, man, like, please don't talk to the feds. It's bad. It's terrible. And he is somebody who's of the opinion that no, like the greater, you have to look at it in a larger, picture. But I also, we kind of started talking a little bit about it. And I was like, at the end of the day, even though that thing happened to that kid, Tariq, that I knew, like, it still hasn't touched us in the same way as maybe other, especially mosques in New York and stuff. So maybe your opinion of that is like shaped by this a little bit. But yeah, it's my dad and I actually have pretty different views on this.
So you also mentioned that many Muslim Americans voted for Obama. And was there like a sentiment you think of betrayal or anger when the administration kind of pushed for this mass surveillance?
So this part of the episode, I have to be honest. So this is more a period of my life where at that time, I kind of didn't have much of an idea of like what was happening because things weren't that great with me personally. But looking back on it, yeah, I think that in many ways, this is the the problem with, I think we were even discussing this earlier in the last question answer about episode 4, like, is it enough to just have the representation, right? To just have to check the box. I think for a lot of people, they were like, oh, well, yeah, so we've got a black president now, so like racism is over. And, you know, like everything he does is going to be like stuff we agree with. And, you know, we were shown that that's not how it works.
You also talked to Asad Dia in this podcast or this episode, who started a charity to offer services to those who are less fortunate. And he was surveilled. Why was it important to have him come on this episode and share his story?
Yeah, I mean, we knew from the beginning, and obviously we knew it was going to be hard to have someone talk openly about, because and a lot of times some of these cases are ongoing, so there's not things people can't always talk. So we were really, really fortunate to have him. I remember when our Asad Butt was like, yo, we got somebody to talk. We were both like, because we kind of didn't know, like, in the way that, you know, I couldn't have Tariq Mahanna on the show, obviously, but like, it was important to just have someone else. And that's the thing I love about the show, is that we do focus on, like, yeah, I'm the narrator or whatever, but that having the guests is just so important to each theme. And it's just not the same if it's like us, like, reading a bunch of facts or whatever. I think it's like not as engaging. But yeah, he was and you know, again, we didn't put everything he said on the, like, it's something, it's hard. Sometimes I look back and I'm like, you know, each interview that we've done is at least an hour, if not more. So there's so much other stuff in there, which is like not in the episode. And maybe we'll release bonus things or something, make a Patreon or whatever. But yeah, it was incredible to have him.